took off all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
just climbs off all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
Now our reconnaissance has spotted the Japanese task forces. This is the moment we've been fighting and praying for. Every plane that can fly and every qualified pilot is ordered into the air.
The Mustang, the P-51, the longest range fighter in the world. Speed, fast climb, quick dive, tight turn.
Time there was an American volunteer group in Asia. Here, Special Advisor to the Chinese Air Force, Claire Chennault, had 84 volunteer pilots, including men such as Tex Hill, George Burgard, and Robert Smith. Nicknamed the Flying Tigers, their P-40 Tomahawks were serviced by Chinese mechanics and 200 American ground crewmen. For advanced training, we sent the fledgling flyer to nearby Kelly Field. There, he flew an AT-6. Although the 1939 Aviator was America's #1 idol, no longer was he a one-man show. The leader and his wingmen were a team, pilot and air crew, flyer and ground crew. Because in this business, every man's life was always in the hands of a team.
Well hidden in the jungle, but the Sandys' job is to find him and fight him. Their aircraft, A-1Es, fly slow enough for the Sandys to observe and slow enough to concentrate their firepower. They are armed with rockets, machine guns, 20-millimeter cannons, and bombs.
The first step was the construction of an air bridge across which supplies were to be flown by flyers of the American Transport Command, shuttling back and forth over what they called the hump. It was a slow process. Equipment had to be taken apart so that it could be loaded aboard planes. They made a sky bridge 525 miles long over the roof of the world and carried across in unarmed transport planes the vital supplies needed by the American and Chinese air forces and the Chinese armies.
people who come to air shows want to see. It's right on your point there. Well, they want to see the jet teams, whether it's the Navy or the Air Force, we got the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. Well, what do they want to see next? Well, they either want to see current military aircraft or former military aircraft. Oh, Warbirds. When something like that's going on, I get the hair standing up and I feel the pride and the excitement. I'm feeling something. Well, that's what I think the Warbirds are about. They're old, gorgeous, big, beautiful, historical planes, and boy, oh boy, when the engine fires up and that noise is going on, a big round radial, or the Merlin on a Mustang, and they fly by, and whistling death, and of course you're driving down, you hear that whistle going on. Those are things you never forget. Oh, and then because you were introduced to them, now you want to go back and hear them again. Well, my name is Jim Olzaki. I'm the new and current president of Warbirds of America. And I have been involved with Warbirds since the early 80s. Have been involved with getting Bob Pond's museum started in Flying Cloud Field outside of Minneapolis, and a member of and volunteering for the Warbirds of America ever since then. I had a little hiatus when I made a move back to Connecticut, but that was for a short period of time while I was getting resituated. As a result of being involved with Bob Pond, I was exposed to a full assortment of Warbirds, and the more I was exposed to them, the deeper I got with falling in love and wanting to be part of it. And Bob Pond was so involved in wanting to share them with the public that it was just an easy connection for me. And together we had the museum up and running and recognized worldwide, and in a book, and going off to air shows and sharing them with other people. That's one of the things I want to try to focus on during my term, is we have to understand how many of our members out there are people who are not necessarily pilots or owners or owning pilots. They're passionate Warbird fans. They want to read about them. They want to follow the history. They want to see them. They want to hear them. There's a ton of folks like that. And after I had finished up my time with Bob Pond's museum, and the cause for that was that I was in corporate America and transferred back to the Northeast and working in the home office in Stamford, Connecticut. I still wanted to stay involved, so I kept going back to AirVenture and going back to Bob's museum and being exposed to the planes. And it was really during that period of time when I was a little bit separated from all of that, that I really started to understand and watch and see and observe people and hear them talking to their kids and their cousins and their uncles about, oh, Grandpa used to fly this plane, or I used to fly this plane. You know, one of my favorite stories is that we had Bob Pond's B-25 at AirVenture one year, and I just happened to be standing by it. And maybe a little segue story. I pretty much kept my nose out of Bob Pond's paint scheme picking when he was acquiring and restoring the different Warbirds. But when he got to B-25, I wrote him a formal letter asking him to paint and honor the most accomplished B-25 in my dad's squadron. My dad was in B-25s in the South Pacific in World War II. And Bob acknowledged that, and he painted the plane as Mitch the Witch. And I'm standing by Mitch the Witch at AirVenture, and comes this elderly gentleman and his family. And I'm watching him from maybe 20 yards away, and he's kind of normal walking, and then you see his eyes kind of look at the plane, and his pace picks up, but he was darn near in a trot when he got close to the plane. He says, "There's my plane, there's my plane." It turns out that he was on the original Mitch the Witch crew, and he was in tears. That's what it's about, people who are passionate. Well, like so many things, but especially history, it is easy to forget, not be exposed to, not understand what was going on in the world back then, and what the aviation meant, and what the greatest generation did to provide us with the freedoms we now enjoy today. And so we're just caretakers of these planes, but we're really caretakers of history. And there's so many kids out there that you can ask a historical question, especially as you go back to the World War II era. They don't even know what you're talking about. So the onus is on us to present that and make that available and try to help them understand, you know, these are memories that we need to keep on forever and honor what the greatest generation did for us to give us these freedoms. And that's also what the pilots, the owners and the pilot owners are doing as well. They're sharing those planes as caretakers for them and trying to make that available to more of the general public. You know, I had been involved with Bob Pond's planes and the museum and helped form it and create it and run it. And then I retired from corporate America down to Florida, and it didn't take long before I was reconnected with Link Dexter, Hall of Famer for Warbirds of America. And we started talking and chatting. Of course, he knew about my history. And that's kind of where it all started. He said, "Hey, you know, we need somebody to take over the local Warbird Squadron, which is Warbird Squadron 24, which covers all the state of Florida." And, you know, so I said, well, sure, I would do that. So we kind of took that over and built that squadron up to a sizable one, as sizes go for the Warbird squadrons. And I was pretty involved with that. And I knew John Baugh, another legend in Warbirds of America. And we got to know each other better and spending more time together. And he kept asking me questions and suggesting things about my involvement with Oshkosh and AirVenture and Warbirds on a national scale. And next thing I know, John had talked behind the scenes to Harold Cannon, who was the president of Warbirds at that time. And I got a call from Harold Cannon. He said, "Well, how would you like to join the board?" Well, okay, that sounded like something that would allow me to step up everything I just spoke to and that I believe in and spread it further than Florida. So here I am, I'm on the board, and we're marching along, and I'm getting more involved. And I got involved with Jim Tobel, and the two of us kind of chaired and ran the Sun and Fun fly-in Warbird effort. And it kind of moved off to a new level. We wanted to reinvent ourselves and get more involvement for East Coast and Southeast Coast members And that's another part of the equation here. We want to expose ourselves to more and more members and membership. So all of a sudden, Warbirds became way more involved with Sun and Fun. Sun and Fun had some of its biggest, better years. And I guess that success kind of led to internal talking. And Connie, the former president, and we had some discussions. And she said, okay, I've done my part. You know, I've done 2 terms. It's time to step down. You know, who wants to step up? The next thing I know, John Baugh's in the background again and talking to folks. And they said, would I like to try it? And here I am. It seemed like a daunting task, but it seemed like something I just needed to give a run at. So one of the things that, you know, Connie's got a lot of foresight and seeing ahead. She says, well, if Zach, if you're going to get more involved, you know, maybe the next thing we should do is get you introduced to all the things that are going on behind the scenes. And there's no better place to do that than at AirVenture, because all the pieces are moving and trying to coordinate with each other. So kind of 2 things happened at the same time. I was asked and accepted taking on a review of our committee structure and talk about, I'll call it a job description, but what the committee was about and who was running it and who the people were on it. And in order to do that, that's when I went around during AirVenture and introduced myself to the people and tried to understand how they worked with it. And that's when you begin to understand that if you're just a member out there or involved in a squadron or volunteering at a local level, you probably don't realize how much is going on with Warbirds of America and what they're doing on behalf of the membership to keep the Warbird movement alive and well. And so, yes, that's exactly right. Warbirds in Review. We had the new youth center, and, you know, what's going on with safety. I went over on the other side of the field when the air show was going on and see just how much is going on behind the scenes. There's a lot going on. And I think, you know, you asked, is there anything, how would I like to change it, alter it, modify it, improve it? And then you reflected, say, well, maybe it's not improved, but, you know, what can I do to add my touch to it? Well, I think we're talking about what I can do. I think we want to try to let membership know how much is going on. If you talk about the other aviation groups out there, you could kind of put them in a specific cubicle and say, well, they're about this one thing and they're about just that one thing. If you step back and look at what Warbirds of America is about, it's about a lot of things in a lot of places to a lot of people. And we're trying to hold that all together. And I think the challenge there is that we're all getting older. The planes are getting older. The older you get, either people are passing away or they don't have the energy to keep this, the effort that you have to put into both mentally and physically to do all of this. So, you know, that was when it all kind of hit me. So here I am, the president now. You know, interestingly enough, you know, so here we are with the pandemic and having virtual meetings and putting things on the media. And when I was back in my corporate career, you know, one of the things a lot of my mentors said, and you'll find it written in books, you know, sometimes challenges are really opportunities. So I thought back one day, look at this. What is the opportunity we have here? Well, we're enjoying that opportunity right now as I speak to you. You know, so there's a lot more virtually going on. Why? Because we can't meet physically. Well, maybe that's good. Maybe we need to do more digital, more computer connections, more virtual meetings. That way we can share ourselves more with our membership. What does that mean? Well, now we can tell our membership, here's all the fronts we operate on, and maybe you didn't realize it. What are we doing in Washington with government affairs? What are we doing with the FAST program for formation and keeping all of our Warbird folks understanding and involved and represented in formation and safety training FAST? What are we doing with the ACE program and the people who have the aerobatic competency, and how are we involved with that? You know, you keep going along the board. What are we doing to put on this huge Warbird piece of AirVenture for the EAA at Oshkosh? What are we doing at Sun and Fun? What do we do when we have NWAC? What do we do when we go to the Reno Air Races? There is so much going on. I think the next step we can take is to help our membership understand those pieces, maybe report to them on those pieces. And quite frankly, you know, maybe somewhere along the way we give ourselves a report card. You know, first of all, the ICAS, the International Council of Air Shows, you know, they get together and they put together surveys at all of the different air shows around the country, and they ask questions to the people when they're leaving. And, you know, so what do the people who come to air shows want to see? You know, it's right on your point there. You know, well, they want to see the jet teams, whether it's the Navy or the Air Force, and we got the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. Well, what do they want to see next? Well, they either want to see current military aircraft or former military aircraft. Oh, Warbirds. So then the other half of the answer to that question is, well, I remember when I was a kid, and my mom and dad would take me to the local parade, which was usually over a veterans event or something. And here comes the band. And that big bass drum is pounding in your chest. And your hair's, well, as a kid, I probably didn't have hair on my arms to stand up. But when something like that's going on, I get the hair standing up and I feel the pride and the excitement. I'm feeling something. Well, that's what I think the Warbirds are about. They're old, gorgeous, big, beautiful, historical planes. And boy, oh boy, when the engine fires up and that noise is going on, a big round radial, or the Merlin on a Mustang, and they fly by, and whistling death, and the Corsairs driving down, you hear that whistle going on. Those are things you never forget. Oh, and then because you were introduced to them, now you want to go back and hear them again. I think that more than anything else is why the people, one of the first things I want to do is get down to the Warbird area. What did they bring this year? Only one of them or two of them are flying, and one's here this year. And every year there's one of those, or more than one of those Warbirds. So you just got to get down there and not miss it. And that's probably a good place to talk about Warbirds in Review. Connie brought us Warbirds in Review. It's got bigger and better every year. And you can pick a segment of a particular day looking on the schedule. And not only is that plane here this year, but it's rolled over to Warbirds in Review. And we've got a former pilot, historian, and owner, and Dave Hartman talking about the history of that plane right there in front of you. So there it is in a nutshell. Two names that everybody should know out there is Bill Fisher, you know, the executive director, and Kristen, his right-hand person as the administrative assistant. They do above and beyond the call of duty. They have a list of whatever they've been doing for years, and then somebody comes up with a new idea, and they're the first to find ways to support it and try to expand on it or introduce us to how we might electronically, digitally move in that direction, because they've got experiences in that area, or they know someone over in EAA who has experience in that area. So they're the first two people that our membership and people who might be interested in the membership should contact and ask questions. They'd be happy to and very willing to point you in the direction of someone on the board who maybe a little more experienced and knowledgeable in an area where your question is coming from. So of course, then we've got the executive committee, and then we've got the officers, and we've got the beauty of the board. For a starter, the beauty of the board is that there's very little turnover. So the people who are on the board understand what the board is about, understand what Warbirds of America is about, and they're not new at it. Because of the passion across the board, you know, somebody's got a plane, they're trying to put it together, and it's a model, and they're looking at some broken part, and they're saying, Jesus, I don't even know what this is. You know, probably the first thing they do is send pictures somewhere, and oh yeah, I know what that is. Only in the end model did they have that, and oh, by the way, there's only one end model in existence, and that's over at so-and-so's place. Well, you give so-and-so a call, and the first thing he does is he realizes somebody else is passionate, trying to put it together, and he's got the only end model. Now, I'm not going to guarantee you every owner would do this, but a lot of them will. The next thing you find out is they cook a deal, and they say, hey, look, I'll pay for the expense. And the guy says, I'm willing to take that part out of my airplane. I will box it up and send it to you. You go take it to your local machinist, you have them duplicate it, you get yourself one custom made. I don't want to talk about what the cost of that might be, but, you know, and then send it back to me and I'll put it back in my plane. And that has happened over and over again. And I think that really speaks to the subject and the question that you asked. The people are so passionate about it, they want to jump for joy that somebody else is as passionate as they are. They want to jump for joy that someone else is in love with the plane they are in love with, that someone else wants to have one of these planes. People just can't wait to hear someone be excited about their plane and that you want to have one like their plane, and they want to help you have another one. Yeah. So again, let's go back to, it's not quite the beginning, it's a little bit after the beginning, but when I'm helping Bob Pond create his museum, you know, here are the pieces, you know, so Bob's got kind of one of everything, at least in the fighters. And, you know, so you crawl up and you sit in the cockpit, and I can't help but tell you, you're not just looking around at the steam gauges. All of a sudden you're saying, well, geez, I wonder who sat in this cockpit. I wonder what challenges pilots who sat in this cockpit had to face. And then I start thinking about people, you know, you kind of moving forward with your question. Well, who do I know that are legends? Randy Sohn. Randy Sohn was one of the very busy pilots for Bob Pond's aircraft. Steve Hinton was one of the very busy pilots for Bob's. And you start thinking about, holy cow, Randy Sohn. He was a guy that took Fifi out of the desert. And, you know, if you ever read the story, you find out, man, they weren't even sure they're going to take off and if it would keep flying. And whoa, and they did that to preserve a one-of-a-kind airplane at that time. Oh, Warbirds of America said, well, Paul started, and John Baugh helped them get started, and Bill Harrison helped them get started, and they found their way to the B-17. Holy cow, some people are stepping up to make these things happen. That makes you even more and more, you have to realize, holy cow, if they spent that much of their time and their passion to get us to that point, the onus is on us to keep the maintenance and the preservation of those planes. And then back to the last question, and the next guy that wants a B-17, what we learned when we got our B-17. And then what about the challenges for flying a B-17? Well, you got to talk to the Bill Harrisons and the Link Dexters, and guess who else has flown one of those? Connie Boland. You know, start thinking about Connie Boland. Holy cow. And somebody look at the list of what Warbirds she's flown. And, you know, that's a good note to leave that subject on, because same as the preserving the airplanes, but the people, the legends, they don't see themselves as legends. They probably don't even see themselves as doing more than the average bear. They just were doing something they wanted to do, and it worked out for themselves and for someone else. And now it becomes a story to share. There's so much of that. That's a keynote on everything Warbird involved. Yeah, you know, I think the first thing I want to tell you is that Warbird back there, that was in Bob Pond's museum. And when Bob passed away, I cooked a deal with his widow to buy it. And so I'm not only flying a Warbird, but I'm flying a memory that I shared with someone I became very close personal friends with. Bob and I developed a relationship where we started doing personal things on the side that were not aviation related, just because we became friends. He was like a big brother. He was like a father to me. We talked about personal things. And I'm going to segue on that. You talk about my flying experience in my plane. So I'm approaching Bob in the very beginning, because he had only 5 Warbirds at the time. I'm saying only. Some people are happy to have 1, right? I said, have you ever thought about opening and running a museum? You know, you've probably got the money, but don't have the time. I might have the time, but I certainly don't have the money. And, you know, one thing led to another, and we thought alike business-wise. So he said, run with it, start a museum for me. We started building that museum. And again, like I said, since we're personal, I'm standing at the museum outside one day with Bob, and a steerman comes taxiing up, and he turns into where you enter the museum grounds. And I turn to Bob, Bob, do you know who that is? And I'm going to kind of cheat. I always like to kind of make believe I'm Bob. So, well, Zach, as a matter of fact, I do know that steerman is mine. I just bought it. And as you well know, anybody who ever became a Warbird pilot in World War II started in a steerman. It's now time for you to start flying a steerman. You know, Bob had $1 million fighters. He didn't need a steerman, though it's nice to have one. Taxiing in one day is a T-6 Texan. The end of the story is Zach. Everybody who flew in a steerman before they got in the fighters, they went to the T-6. And it's time for you to start flying a T-6. You know, I can't prove it, but to this day, I'm going to choose to believe that Bob and I were so close that he bought those planes so that he could watch me take the next step. And I'll never forget that. And so the last step was that I finally retired to Florida, and it was another kind of hiatus from Warbirds. Well, one thing led to another. It's the little pieces of the story we don't need. but Bob passed away. I contacted the widow. Bob protected most of his collection, which is now the Palm Springs Air Museum. But there were about a half a dozen planes not inside that community. The widow and I had a couple of conversations. Steve Hinton got involved, and lo and behold, I now hold and own a Warbird that was in that museum that I helped start, whatever the heck it is now, 35 years ago or something. And I'm flying it around and trying to keep that memory. And I'm flying it around, and I want to get formation involved. The guy who's training me or looking over my shoulder is involved in a demo team. Well, lo and behold, I got my formation card, and the demo team tapped me on the shoulders, and we just lost one of our members. How would you like to fly with us? So that's the answer to your question, and what I answered in the earlier question. You just keep swinging and being involved and doing what's fun, and the next thing just kind of presents itself, and then it's your option. You know, you say yes or no, and I am thankful to be lucky enough to have all these stories to tell, share, view, and you know, now it's time for me to pass that baton and try to help others have the same experiences that I've had.